First, let me say how glad I am to be invited to share my thoughts with you on the occasion of the celebration of your 50 years since establishment. I recognize their lordship, the judges who are present in this forum. I also recognize the academics who are present in the forum, the president of the Uganda Law Society, the president of the Makerere University Students Society, and the students who are present this morning to celebrate the great work that your society has achieved over the last 50 years. In the scheme of things, 50 years is a very short time, but has been an opportunity for the university and her alumni to demonstrate to Uganda and indeed Africa that the institution is worthy of celebration. His Lordship took us through the history of the faculty, now School of Law, and was able to demonstrate by making reference to the contribution that has been made by the alumni of the university and specifically the School of Law. And it is clear that the graduates of Makerere Faculty of Law have contributed monumentally in the history of Uganda and by extension East Africa, and by extension Africa, and by extension the world. But this morning I've been asked specifically to address the subject of the role of students in democratization. When one is asked to speak on a subject such as that, one is likely to descend into defining what democracy is. I will not, because I am aware that I'm speaking to law students who have gone through courses in which they have been told what democracy is. Save to point out that given the history of our countries and the manner in which we teach law, the definitions which you have been exposed to are fundamentally Eurocentric definitions. And perhaps it is in a forum such as this that we must now ask ourselves whether the time has come that we must begin to reconfigure the DNA of some of these foundational terms. Because as you know, even if I said I would not define democracy, that the tendency from Eurocentric scholars, and we sometimes are, is to define democracy as handed down to us by scholars from the West. Indeed, many an African scholar feels that they are at the acme of learning and education when they cite sources from England or the United States of America, in itself a vestige of mental colonization. So that we will define democracy as a government of the people, by the people, for the people, because Abraham Lincoln said so, and we are told that he said so. We will also define democracy as being present where we have multi-party politics, periodic elections, and indeed we have the civil society. But perhaps now, as younger scholars, it is time to ask the question whether this is what democracy constitutes, or whether a democracy, the definition notwithstanding, should be understood to mean a political environment in which the people's will is expressed, and also to appreciate that there can never be one size fits all democracy. That is why the United States of America calls ourselves a democracy, and Japan calls herself a democracy, and Uganda also calls herself a democracy, notwithstanding that their DNA and structures may not be the same. So we must warn ourselves when we are asked to speak about words which are as malleable as democracy, and begin to interrogate their DNA and begin to deconstruct that DNA and begin to re-engineer their DNA, particularly in the African continent, which has become a victim of the thing that we call democracy. I say a victim because in the recent past, particularly in the post-Berlin Wall collapse, we have seen that in the quest for democracy, elective democracy, many African countries descend into chaos. Just this morning, you will have seen that the elections will be held in Zambia on the 12th day of August, and you've seen that the military has been deployed in the streets of Zambia. You yourselves in Uganda have seen during electioneering period when security forces are deployed in the streets of Kampala and other cities. You've seen that happen in Kenya. You've seen that happen in Ghana and many other countries, which calls into question whether when we talk about democracy in that sense, and when we talk about elections as the defining character of democracy, whether indeed we have not been victimized by this thing called democracy as handed down to us by the conceptual West. I say these preliminary things because I'm speaking to lawyers and lawyers in the making. Lawyers who upon graduation will to themselves as learned friends. But do we ever interrogate why we call ourselves learned friends? Many of you will know that the term or the reference learned friends has a long history. It is a history that was only preserved to choice professions, 3 to be exact. The medical profession. Medical doctors were allowed to refer to themselves as learned friends. Lawyers were allowed to refer to themselves as learned friends. And theologians were allowed to refer to themselves as learned friends. Why? The question is, it is because the law is a qualification which requires extensive training. We are the only profession in the world, if I ignore the others for a moment, that can claim to have a smattering of knowledge of everything there is. Many of you who are lawyers will know. Many of you who are judges will know. Many of you who are lawyers in the making will know that when you are called upon to adjudicate on anything, if you are a judge, even if you are a doctor, you hand down a decision which will bind doctors. If it is an engineering issue, you hand down a decision which will bind engineers. And if you are a lawyer and you are cross-examining a doctor, many of you will remember the many occasions when you make the doctors look bad, notwithstanding that you are not doctors yourself. That is why we are a learned profession. And when you are a learned profession, it behooves you to ensure that you conduct yourself with the greatest of dignity. That when you are a learned profession, you ensure that you are a warrior for truth and justice. That when you are a member of the learned profession, you ensure that you are a warrior for that which is good in the society. And I heard the judge about the role of a lawyer in society, particularly in pre-industrial societies. Remember There are many times when those in the society perceive us as being parasitic of the societies rather than as agents of social engineering. When we talk about the role of students in society and therefore democracy, we must always ask ourselves, are we parasitic upon the society? In other words, is the society the poorer because we are lawyers, or society is the better because we are lawyers? And I dare say, ladies and gentlemen, that a lawyer is an important agent in any society. Many of us who practice law remember that the law gives us an opportunity to be midwives in the process of determining justice according to law. It is an honorable profession because it is something that allows you to sit in judgment of your fellow men and women if you are a judge. It is an important profession because if you are a defense lawyer, it gives you an opportunity to ensure that your client, if it is a criminal case, is not subjected to the vagaries of law without proper order. It is an important and a honorable profession if you are prosecuting a criminal case to ensure that those who engage in calumny are not allowed to be dangerous to the society. And if you are in a civil environment and you are dealing with a commercial matter, it is important that you are a midwife to ensure that justice is done. And that, to me, is a critical role that we play in our societies. But we must always remember that to whom much is given, a lot is expected. It is therefore incumbent upon us at all times to remember that inasmuch as the law is our source of livelihood, we must conduct ourselves with decorum and dignity. And that requires, among other things, that we are ethical. It requires, among other things, that we are true to justice. It requires, among other things, that we are humble. It requires, among other things, that we recognize that the nobility of our profession notwithstanding, we are not the possessors of the monopoly of knowledge and wisdom, and that therefore we must carry ourselves with humility. Indeed, we must be the personification of humility. But we must also be warriors for truth. We must be prepared to be warriors for truth and to be sacrificial about it. Those of you who have had the advantage of listening to Nigeria's Wole Soyinka will tell you, and particularly when you read his little book, his prison diary, The Man Died, he says, the man dies in silence who remains silent in the face of tyranny. It therefore is incumbent upon us at all times when we are dealing with the larger society to be present in the rooftops. And when I talk about rooftops, I'm not talking about them literally, I'm speaking metaphorically, that we use the forums which are available to us to be present in the arena for purposes of articulating what is good and just for society, even when we are threatened with personal danger and when our safety and our well-being is threatened. Many lawyers in Uganda have done that. Many lawyers in Uganda have paid the ultimate price. And you young men and women who are students have a duty to follow in that path. Remember, great men and women rise on the shoulders of greater men and women who preceded them. But for those of us who are teachers and those who are teaching you, remember always that it is our desire that you are better than us, because there is no greater recompense for a teacher than to produce pupils who surpass them. But that requires a number question, what kind of student are you? I remember that question being posed by a great Ghanaian, Agri, Kwejir Agri, James Eman Kwejir Agri, sometimes referred to as the Agri of Africa. You will remember this James Kwejir Agri when he was one of the leading lights of the Ghanaian struggle for independence. When he was talking to young Ghanaians, he told them, and that was on the eve of independence, that in order for Ghana, then known as Gold Coast, to be a great country, it is incumbent upon our young men and women to be young men and women who are imbued with the desire to serve society, that they are imbued with the desire to change their societies, and that in the quest to change their societies, that they must start from the beginning. They must change themselves. They must change their villages. They must change their neighborhoods. They must change their countries, so that when they are dead and gone, and we have the opportunity to write the obituary, we may say of them, the society was the better, because these were students who knew what they wanted, and they were sacrificial in serving their countries. I am now urging you that that is the kind of student that you must be, because there is a time for everything. There is a time to be a student, and this is that time. And when you are a student, you must ask yourself, what kind of student are you? Are you a good student who is demonstrating that in the fullness of time you will grow into a great student? Chile's Salvador Allende said in the 1960s that when you are a university student and you are not a revolutionary, there is something wrong with you. I therefore urge all students of Makerere School of Law to be revolutionaries. But what kind of a revolutionary? And revolting against what and about what? These are the questions. When I talk about being a revolutionary, I'm not talking about fire-eating pseudo-revolutionaries whose only claim to fame will be that they are in the arena and in the front yard when there is a riot. No, that is not my kind of revolutionary. My kind of a revolutionary is one who has conquered himself. My kind of a revolutionary is one who has identified the problems of the society. My kind of a revolutionary is one who has therefore said that I'm going to participate in the struggle to change the society. My kind of revolutionary is the one who says that I'll speak truth to power, but not with the arrogance that will inflame their anger, but with the firmness that will open their eyes. I'm urging you to be that kind of revolutionary, because when you are that kind of a revolutionary, then you can change your society. And our societies are crying for change. I want the young student now to be a student